Well, thank you, Bill, and welcome back, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here today to lead this very talented group of 21st century bankers. But before I introduce them, I thought I would just set up this discussion for the afternoon and connect it to what you heard this morning in terms of this millennial and 21st century banking segment. As you know, we are here to offer a very compelling discussion, and this afternoon is sure to be just that, because this is a very strategic topic for all of us. It's the war on talent. Recruiting, developing, and retaining talent is at the core of any successful organization. It drives innovation, it helps us grow our market share, and facilitates the kind of organizational leadership that we need to take us into the future. It also is imperative to have potential leaders that are a competitive advantage to us in the industry, and they will help us pilot the downturns in the industry as well as lead us through the economic vitality that we will experience in the future through innovation. We own understanding this group of young bankers and what drives these individuals so we can encourage their contribution and appeal to their desires. So enter the millennials. They are going to be a great career generation. Not good, but great. They're idealistic, they are optimistic, they want their work to count, and they want to make the world a better place and will do so through their careers. They love their elders, they're team-oriented, and they're confident, and of course, they're very tech-savvy. They're going to be a great career generation, but right now, they are driving their bosses nuts. They have a flawed sense of entitlement, very genuine, but a flawed sense of entitlement. They have unrealistic expectations about their pay, their position, and promotion. They have a short attention span, and they want more on-the-job guidance than most bosses are willing to give them. This driving factor that's behind this is their core values, and we effectively gave them those core values through the parenting that we did. The millennials are the most adult-supervised generation to date, and now they want us to be their mom and dads on the job. They require a lot of upfront guidance from us, and they're used to it from their parents, from their teachers, from their coaches, the soccer mom, the NASCAR dad. Because of this, these very unique core values, they need to be recruited differently, they need to be managed differently, they need to be trained differently, and they need to be retained differently. And that comes from the C-level on down. It's really all about the culture that we're developing for the future. So get ready to take notes for the next 30 minutes. We will give you some key insights to the human capital equation. And so with that, please allow me to introduce our very talented panel. They're the cream of the crop of the millennial generation and rising to the top. So I'll start to my left, Katie Boyd, and Katie is here representing the great state of Texas. She is Senior Vice President at First Capital Bank of Texas with responsibilities over training, marketing, and the retail call center. She began her career at First Capital in 2005 and has held positions in multiple areas such as branch management, commercial lending, and compliance. Katie is a graduate of the University of Arkansas, go Hogs, and she received her degree in marketing management. So welcome, Katie, glad to have you. And then amongst the ladies, we have Thomas Richard, and Thomas Richards is the Director and Assistant VP of Owensville Banking Company. He is the 5th generation of his family to work in the bank. Very, very successful family, which was founded in 1893. He said his great-great-grandfather and great-great-great-grandfather started it up. So very, very impressive. He holds a BA in economics from Centre College, where he was awarded the Charles Campbell Prize for Economics. So congratulations and welcome, Thomas. And then finally, we have Vansia, and Sia is the Executive Marketing Coordinator at Connect One Bank. It's a $3 billion plus institution with 24 branches throughout New Jersey. The bank was founded in 2005 by civic and business leaders to serve local residents and businesses by providing the highest level of personalized community banking. And Sia has really worked hard in the marketing role to help develop the bank's social media strategy and maintaining its digital presence throughout its blog and numerous online channels. And in 2013, she oversaw the rebranding of the company to Connect One Bank from its previous name, North New Jersey Community Bank. So welcome, Sia. Glad to have you. So as you can see, we have a dynamite, talented panel here, and we are going to kick it off with, let me just say, why banking? Of all the careers that you all could pick, why banking? Katie?
Well, I wish I could give you a really solid, golden nugget to go to take back, but I really wasn't looking for banking in particular. I came to Midland, Texas in 2005, and I came from Bentonville, Arkansas, Walmartville, USA, which I fear may be a four-letter word in this room right now, so I'm sorry about that. Don't hold that against me. But I worked in the corporate marketing division of Sam's Club, and so when I came to Midland, I was definitely looking for a marketing role. And when I arrived in the oil patch, those weren't exactly plentiful, and so I sent my resume to our local chamber, and thankfully First Capital was very involved in the chamber, and we still are very involved in the chamber, and so they gave my resume over to First Capital Bank, and the human resource director gave me a call. I had probably the most fun interview that I'd ever had. We laughed a lot, and they really got to know me during that interview process, and that very same day they called and hired me as a new account representative. So that is where my start in banking came from.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'll skip to the end and let the ladies go first. So, Sia?
So I, like Katie, didn't intend on being in a bank. I didn't actually want to work in banking. In college, I had launched a startup, and so that was my plan, and I was going to graduate, and Oprah was going to call me. And I graduated, and there was no phone call, and there was no Oprah, so I said, okay, well, I need to build my resume and get a job until Oprah calls me. And I found myself at Connect One, then North Jersey Community Bank, now Connect One, and over 4 years, at the time, I realized I had so much opportunity, and I actually found myself at a place that didn't think it was a bank. And my role at this startup that I was running and my role at the bank kind of blurred into one because the jobs were so similar. So, and it's been a good time since then.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. And Thomas?
You know, I'd be lying if I didn't say that, the family tradition involved in banking didn't have a pretty big impact on my career choice. I was an econ major, so I thought that the world of finance would probably be a good place to start, and I was really attracted by, just the opportunity to work. I mean, the bank that I worked for is very small. We only have 3 locations in rural eastern Kentucky, so I kind of thought it would be great to have an opportunity to make an immediate impact on the organization, rather than going to work for some large corporation where I'd kind of be just a number, basically. So those factors, kind of led me to my career choice, and I've loved it. It's been great. So glad that I am in banking.
Well, we are too, and it sounds like in all 3 cases, it's really about networking and personal relationships that you all developed. Tell the audience a little bit about how can we attract others like you?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and start. It's kind of a 2-part answer for me. So first what I'll say is we know we can't keep doing the same exact things and expect different results. So I think first and foremost, we have to shake up that recruitment process. And it doesn't mean completely deviating from the things that we've always done, print ads. I know we all probably have a print ad when a new posting comes up, but it's really transforming and remembering who we are talking to. And so not being afraid to add a little bit of humor into those ads. And we recently launched a recruitment campaign that really tells our culture story, and we do that with humor. So I think that's really important. Along those same lines, I think we've got to really learn how to broaden that talent pool and use our resources that we have to do that. And I think tools like LinkedIn, just to name one, but there's many others out there, really help us do that. So we're not relying on someone seeing that ad or walking into a job fair that we happen to be at, but we're going out and finding those people. So I think that's kind of the first point. And then the second point I would like to make is once they come into the interview process is really shifting kind of the questions that we're asking. So yes, I think it's very important to ask those technical skill questions. You know, if I'm going to hire someone in marketing, I want to make sure they know what marketing is, but really kind of pushing past that and more behavioral style questions. What would be important to me is questions about their volunteer experience. What philanthropies are really, really important to them? Because that tells me really a lot about the person I'm talking to, getting to the core of who they are. Those employees tend to be a lot more loyal. We don't have to tell them they need to come to work and give us 110%. They hold themselves to that higher standard. So those are just a couple of things that I've tried to implement in recruiting more high-level employees.
Right, back to that interest in wanting to make it count.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Thomas?
You know, I think work-life balance is really important for millennials. At our bank, we've got a PTO type system. We've just recently implemented that. So it kind of allows a little bit more flexibility for when our employees want to take time off. Working, you know, over the internet, telecommuting, that kind of a thing is also a great option for some employees. You know, it's not reasonable for anyone to expect that they're going to walk in a job and be CEO in a month, you know. So I think as millennials, we have to temper our expectations. But if the managers can somehow find a way to allow millennials to feel like they have an impact on whatever they do on the organization, I think that's really key, because it allows the millennial to take ownership of what they do and see that it does make a difference. So I think those are two key things that managers can do.
Great insights. So setting the right expectation up front and really directing them and channeling them to where their strengths are. We know that we need to set that expectation, and somebody said, yeah, you know, you need to basically on the onboarding let them know that no, it might take 20 to 25 to 30 years to become CEO, not days. So definitely good insights. Thanks, Thomas. Sia?
So I think that our generation, when searching for jobs, is looking for meaning more than money. We look for purpose, and obviously money is important, we have to pay the bills, but does your company have a mission that we can buy into, that our generation can buy into? Are you up to date with the latest technologies? Are there opportunities for growth? We're very ambitious, and I know everyone thinks we think we know everything, but we don't, and we want the ability to learn and grow. And be mentored, and like Thomas said, flexibility, the telecommuting is important, and of course ownership. We want to feel like we can impact change, and we can be a part of the process of what's happening at your company.
Great, and so let's turn that on its ear. And so for these CEOs, what should they be looking for today in hiring and developing future leaders? So what attributes in those leaders should they be looking for to take us into the future?
So one thing we always say at Connect One Bank is we don't necessarily hire for skill, we hire for attitude. I believe our generation can learn very quickly. So I think whether it's technology, marketing, credit, lending, it's just facts that can be taught. But if you have good attitude, if you can adapt, if you can be nimble, if you can be open to change, because the industry is changing, then those are qualities you want in someone at your company.
Thomas?
I think ingenuity and creativeness is really important. You know, banks can sometimes be perceived as basically being like a utility. You know, we're all the same. It's like an electric company kind of a thing. So I think for the next generation leaders, I think you really need to have innovative and creative people, so that we can kind of hopefully change that perception a little bit, and you know, not seem so cold, and you know, it's not like you don't want to just be like a utility where they just expect you to flip the light and the lights come on, that it works all the time. We want to be able to engage with our customers in a different way than that. So.
Well, I would say, you know, a lot of what Sia said, we hire for attitude, and we've done we put a lot of work into building a really rich culture, especially over the past 5 to 7 years. And so when we're hiring, we're looking for those attitudes and those personalities. I mean, a lot of it has to do with that philanthropic spirit. Will they fit into that? Because that's who we are. So I guess that's how I would say a philanthropic spirit.
Yep, you bet. It's all about the culture. So, and Thomas, you mentioned about the engagement with the customer. Let's kind of take it to the next level. This morning, we considered the link between culture and the customer experience. And as we heard this morning, the Millennials Are Coming panel this morning, Dan, and the team there mentioned that the emerging customer base is one of the largest in American history, and it has a very specific perception of the banking industry. What changes are you seeing in customers' expectation from your point of view, and what's important?
I think technology is probably one of the most important things. Just among my peers, among my friend group, if they don't have a mobile app, or if they don't have the ability to deposit a check without having to go to the bank, that's really important to them. That's how they are comfortable with interacting with their banks. I think it's really tough to engage millennials. Like I said earlier, I think the banking industry can be perceived as a utility, and all they want it to do is they want it to work, and if it doesn't work, they want to know why, and they're upset. So I think it's very tough to engage millennials, and I don't want to pretend like I have the answer. I think social media can be a part of it, but I also don't think it's a panacea, and I think it can be done poorly sometimes. And I think doing social media poorly is worse than not doing it at all, especially when it comes to responding to complaints that come through those channels. So I think if you're going to jump into social media, you got to jump in all the way and do it 100%, because I think the consequences of doing it poorly can definitely be troublesome.
What do you think, Katie?
Well, I mean, when it comes to customer engagement, you're probably not going to see, my bank advertising our great CD rate, because that's not what people want to hear about. We've made a very conscious effort in the past few years to really flip that lens and shine it out onto our communities and our customers and celebrating their good works, because we all know that when they see themselves on our Facebook page, they're going to share it with everyone they know. And so talk about engaging customers, that's really a quick, easy way to do that. And, everyone's happy. It's a very positive message. Mm-hmm. I totally get where you're coming from. If you're going to do it, you need to make sure you're committed to doing that and doing that right. Mm-hmm. So that can be, a tricky thing to deal with. But once you're committed to it, it's such a powerful tool. It's definitely the way the world is moving. We all know that. I think the expectation from our customers is only going to grow. We were talking earlier about how most of us, we grew up with a cell phone in our hand, and we are so comfortable talking in the social media space. That's only going to grow. And I was telling them about my daughter. She's 5, but when she was 2, she walked up to the TV and tried to do a touch screen, and she didn't understand why that didn't work. So it's here to stay. It's only going to grow. And I think the customer expectation, especially in the social media space, mm-hmm. is really going to grow.
Not noise. Social media.
It's not noise. No, it's here.
Great comments. Sia.
So I believe that customer engagement starts with employee engagement, which we just talked about. So I think that's number one. But then to follow up on that, I think to have your clients engaged, you have to be present when and where they need you. So yes, a bank can't stay open 24/7, but do they have access to their banker? Can they send them an email at any time? Is a banker going to get back to them within 24 hours? I mean, if I have to wait, I don't care if it's my mom. If I'm waiting a day to get an email back, we get impatient. And I think especially with millennials, everyone talks about technology. I think that our technology is second nature to us. For us, it's old news. So we're intolerant to inefficiencies. If I'm interested in a bank and they tell me I have to come in to fill out a form, that's just outrageous, and we won't tolerate that. So I think providing the products, the tools, and the information the way that your clients need them is the way to engage them.
And how do we get our staff prepared for that? So tell us what you guys have done in terms of getting that staff ready.
Well, I think there's just got to be a lot of communication, a lot of celebration around it, and why that is a good thing and a big deal. And again, it's about, I think, when you're celebrating your staff members, your customers, your team members, that's really easy to get excited about, and they want to go tell that story. So I think it's all about the message and making sure that's communicated very, very well.
Great. Thomas?
I think to get your staff ready for any kind of change, whether it be regulatory or coming from your customers, it's just thorough training, repetitive, making sure that you can't just tell someone something once and expect them to be proficient at it. So I think just looking out ahead and being prepared for the changes that are coming, and make sure to clearly communicate that to your staff is the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So I think this is a tough one. I don't think you can actually get ready. I think you have to always be ready, because there's always something. And for us at Connect One, we have a very fast-moving, competitive environment. So everyone wants to know about what's next. Everyone's already talking about it before it's out. So I think it goes back to culture, and having a culture that wants to adopt new technologies and is going to management and saying, hey, Apple's had this product for 2 weeks, when are we getting it?
Yep, that's right. And in fact, I think you've stated it very well, all three of you. This is very much cultural. And culture, we know, is driven from the top. That's why the CEO, from the CEO on down, this needs to be an imperative at the center of attention in terms of our strategies. How do we deal with this ever-growing millennial disruptor, not only on the customer side, but on the associate side? And we all know that strategy eats anything else for breakfast. So the culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we need to make sure that we are definitely making sure our strategies include the war on talent and how we get at this millennial segment to be able to really be successful in the future. So great comments, lots of color in and around how we engage that customer experience and use our associates as advocates. What about the higher purpose? We all talked about, as millennials, you all want your work to count. You want it to be meaningful. We need to recruit for that, and we need to also market towards that. So tell me a little bit about how banks cut through this negative rhetoric that's out there that always seems to cloud conversations about banking, instead of really emphasizing the positives that banking does, not only for the community, but for their customers. Talk a little bit about that. Thomas, why don't you start?
Sure. I don't think you'll ever completely get rid of those detractors of the banking industry. I think people are skeptical of bankers, just as a lot of people don't like lawyers, a lot of people don't like bankers. It's kind of the same thing. But I think we can provide an alternative narrative so that it's not just the detractors that are out there, advocating for their causes. I think by performing good deeds and actions, just like the Habitat for Humanity build on Saturday, I think getting that message out there is very key. And like I said, I don't think you'll ever get rid of all of the detractors of the banking industry. It's just, I feel like it's natural. But I think we can at least provide an alternative narrative to, kind of contradict at least some of their criticisms.
Very good. Zia?
So I think on an individual level, again, I know I keep saying it, but it's really focusing and investing on your culture, taking the time to develop and align everyone in your company. However, on an industry level, I think we all need to kind of step it up a notch. Everyone has a bank, and if everyone thinks banking is an outdated industry, then that is going around for a reason. So I think that we have to, as an industry, kind of send out a bigger message about being there to support the business owner, offer up-and-coming products, not be afraid to take on millennials, and not be afraid to take on the risk that's associated with, because this is a new world that we're entering and we're living in, but banking is still very much stuck in the past. I hate to say it, but.
So working on that perception to try
Yes.
to get that innovation perception changed.
Yeah, I think we all realize, bad news travels fast, but the great thing for us is so does good news. And I think we've seen it time and time again, even in just recent social media movements, the Ice Bucket Challenge, I think we all know what that is. So good news really does travel fast, and millennials are hungry for those heartfelt, warm stories. And so it's up to us, just kind of mirroring what they both have said, is we've got to do a better job at telling those stories. And again, that starts with your culture. You are having those volunteer-minded team members that are going out and doing those good deeds. And then we've got to tell everyone about it. And I think the trick is you can't tell it once. You've got to be very consistent in keeping those activities going on. And I think you've got to tell it on lots of different mediums. You can't just do one Facebook post and think you've saved the world. You've got to keep at it, and you've got to be very intentional in doing it, and you've really got to be sincere, because millennials are going to see right through it if you're not. So
absolutely. Coming from this group, very authentic, and absolutely, it takes all of our associates within the organization. If you think about how many bankers there are in this world, if we can work towards really advocating on behalf of the greater good, that certainly will take us miles. Well, just to kind of reiterate a few things that we talked about, obviously networking is a huge component, whether it's just word of mouth or through all the different technology networking vehicles. And by the way, we did a Twitter earlier and did a selfie, so we're going to show you that later. So that was pretty fun. But it's about networking. It's really about how do we target the core values of this particular demographic to really try to recruit them so that we can really target that interest in going for the greater good and really wanting to make a difference. Also being creative and innovative, and really at the heart of the culture that we all need to really aspire to. Also, it's about attitude. They've got to have the want to. I think you mentioned that, and so that really maybe even is over the competencies that you're looking for to really kind of get that person that's the right fit in our culture. And obviously, we talked about staff readiness, and really, you mentioned, Sia, that it's really about always being ready, and we have to be comfortable. We have to get comfortable being uncomfortable in this day and age, because it's a constant change. So with the kind of the final comments before we go to Q&A, I thought this is your chance, guys. So you have an opportunity now to give these CEOs, what's your advice for the future in this war on talent, and how do we attract this growing millennial segment to banking? Katie?
So a couple of things. So number one, I know we've talked a lot about social media, being in that digital space. My advice would be, don't be afraid to go there. I've been to several conferences in the marketing school in the past couple of years. And I'm always so surprised to hear at those conferences, especially when it's a marketing conference, of how many bank leaders are terrified of that space. And so I think first and foremost, if we want to attract them, we've got to be where they are. That's where they are. So just not being afraid of all the things that could happen, just being prepared so if it does happen, we can handle it. So that would be number one. And then the second thing, and it kind of goes along the same lines, is not being afraid to let your brand personality really show through. Like I mentioned earlier with a job posting, having the courage to put a little humor in it. I think especially the millennials really appreciate that. So those are kind of the two things.
Good stuff. Thomas?
I think in regards to attracting millennials for employees, I said it earlier, I think you got to have competitive pay. I think flexibility is very important if their job allows for it. PTO or telecommuting occasionally, stuff like that. And also, I think it's important especially if you're hiring these people for, potential higher up positions, I think that there needs to be a clear plan or a clear path that they can take, to achieve those career goals that they have. And then as far as attracting millennial customers, I think technology is king. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for smaller banks, because I think it can kind of level the playing field between small and big banks somewhat. The relevance of massive brick and mortar branch networks is, it's questioned. It's in question now. So, and I think technology can be employed by the smallest of banks as well as the largest of banks. So I think it could be a plus.
Great, good insights both from the associate as well as the customer. Sia, your thoughts?
So I guess my advice would be, well, I'll start with some advice I got when I first started working. 2 weeks before I started my job, I was told to never be afraid to make an impact on the company that you work for, and never be able to challenge something that doesn't seem right or ask why. So my advice to management would be to let people challenge you and take the risk of giving young people the opportunity to own whatever it is they're working on. I actually, this may be a little bit of a sidebar, but I actually did some Googling today, and if you go on thesaurus.com and search the word employee, some of the synonyms are cog, hand, help, or servant. And I think for our millennium, or our generation, well, I'm sure we're going to get online immediately and fix that, but I don't think that remains. We want to take on more, and we want ownership of projects, and we want to build something together with you as a company, and that really excites us, and that makes us want to come to work every day, and that makes us want to answer emails on Sunday night at 9 o'clock. But it has to start with management, right? So the three of us have had the opportunity to do things like that because management has allowed us to. So that would be my advice to all of you.
Well, thank you, and we really appreciate these great insights. How about a round of applause for this terrific panel?
Good job.
Good job. Okay, we want to toss it up for questions from the audience, so anything at all, please feel free to grab a mic and jump in with a question for the panel. There, we've got one.
To ask the millennials this directly. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about cybersecurity and information security. And one of the things that we old gray-haired people keep not understanding is why a millennial would want to do business as a customer with organizations on the fringe that are not within the regulated banking industry, and we want to be able to convince you that it's safer. That doesn't seem to resonate at all. So will it ever resonate? It's in your best interest. And how can that message not be what I just did, which is to point to you and say, it's in your best interest?
Great question.
So can I start off with that? I think that the first problem is in the financial sector, non-banks are innovating faster than banks. And I think, like we discussed earlier, a lot of us are dependent on service providers, and so we can only keep up as fast as they can keep up. So to some extent, we kind of have to play on their timelines, but as banks can offer a lot that PayPal can't. I mean, if someone has a question, can they call up PayPal and say, hey, you know, am I better off putting my extra money in a savings account or a money market or a CD, and how long am I locked in for it? They can't provide that, so maybe that's where you up it up, you step it up a notch, and you offer what the competitor can't.
And I'll add that, you know, like I mentioned before, you know, we've all grown up in that digital space, and it's so normalized to us. And the thing about those other companies, like a PayPal, is, you know, their marketing budgets are huge, and they are everywhere. So the brand themselves have become so mainstream and just normal to the millennials. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Is they're everywhere. They're in their face, in their ear, all the time, and so that brand recognition, I think, has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Thomas, any thoughts?
You know, it's tough. I think if those companies on the fringe are less secure than your traditional banks, then I think it'll just take us getting burned by using them, you know, for a data breach to happen, for us to really value the potential extra security that a bank offers. But, you know, I'm not really sure that banks are, you know, necessarily more secure than those fringe companies. They could be, but I don't know that. You know, with the headlines that you always read about these massive data breaches, I think we're all vulnerable. And that's the scary thing, is I think we thought we were a lot safer than we are. So it's tough.
Well said. More questions?
First of all, thank you for participating, and thank you for joining our industry. In the comments, Thea, you mentioned the risk of hiring a millennial.
Yes.
Can the three of you talk a little bit about what is that risk that we should be prepared for?
Well, I mean, I would guess depending on the culture that they're entering into, sometimes they're going to be a lot more loyal depending on that person you're hiring. But I think the turnover risk for a millennial is probably a lot greater than, the generations in the audience. So, and we all know how expensive that can be. So I think just off the cuff, turnover and lack of loyalty, because we're always looking for the next best thing, the next greatest thing. So I think that is the biggest risk that sticks out to me.
I agree, actually. At my bank, we still have people that are working that have worked there for 30, 35, 40 years, and they're starting to retire now. And the turnover rate that we've experienced that since I've been there, that I've seen with our younger employees is definitely a lot higher. One thing that's a little bit different about my bank, we actually still have a defined benefit plan. And so some people cite that as a reason why our turnover historically has not been as high as maybe some other banks. But I think turnover risk is definitely the biggest one as far as millennials go.
I actually haven't experienced that. I think that the millennials we've had have been around so far, and we haven't seen high turnover. We've actually attracted a lot of young talent from the bigger banks, which is pretty cool. I think when I was talking about risk earlier, I think some management teams in banking can see taking on this young group as a risk because we're too likely to lash out or we're too opinionated and we think we want to be CEO. But I mean, really the greater risk is not integrating people like us into your companies because, I mean, right now we're a third of the workforce. Our population is double any other generation. So I think if that fact is correct, I'm not sure. So I think that's the real risk. So it may be a little bit of a change. It's an adjustment. It's not what anyone's used to, but it's something that has to be done.
And that's a great question, and actually we talked a little bit about it at lunch because it's really understanding those core values of the millennials, and they've grown up in an era where they've not seen a lot of company and employee loyalty. Their parents have been laid off over the course of, and so they're calloused to staying with companies for very long. So I think you hit the nail on the head from a retention perspective. It's going to have to be aimed at how do you appeal to that greater good? How can you help them with this career aspiration to try to help hold their hand along the way? Because it's going to need to be very different than the way we've operated in the past in how we bring them up the line and help keep them engaged so they're interested. And the point that Sia made about willingness to take risk on a younger group of managers to own a project. And that if we don't do that, we may be missing some key insights, first of all, but also we may be risking losing them because they get disenchanted. Great question.
Good afternoon. Just a quick question. I'm relatively new to the banking sector as well, and I'm finding the industry, and I'll probably get run over by a truck on the way out, but tends to be a little slow in their decision making and in their risk taking, although they're involved in mitigating risk every day. But what's going on inside of your institutions to help alleviate that, and what has your management done to support you in that process?
Well, I can speak to that. I'm very lucky because I have a very innovative and forward-thinking leadership team, and not because they're sitting right in front of me, but maybe a little, no. So, we're the bank that, has adopted the NCR technology. We are kind of looking towards the future where the brick and mortar branches aren't as prominent as they are today. So I think it starts with your most senior leadership staff, and whatever that philosophy is going to trickle down. So within my bank, and I can only speak for myself, we haven't really seen that issue, and that started with our leadership team.
I'd be the first to say that I think my bank is one of those ones that you're talking about that can be a little risk averse and hesitant to change with the times. And I'll do a little plug for Stonier. I go to the ABA's Stonier Graduate School of Banking. I'm working on my capstone project right now, and that's actually part of the focus of my project. So I hope that when I make that presentation in front of the board, that maybe some of the ideas that I've been working with can maybe help change that.
So I think that's a really good question. At Connect One, I don't think you can use the word Connect One and slow in a sentence together. It's a very fast-paced environment, I think. And I think, in fact, that's what attracts and keeps a lot of our younger employees there. And it keeps our older employees youthful. We move fast, we get things done. You'll hear that said all the time. And what's even more awesome is if someone's not moving fast, if someone's not getting things done, we're not afraid to go and challenge that person. I've walked into a manager's office before and said, hey, we're behind, where is this? We need to get this done. And some people are not used to it, or they're almost afraid. Why is this 12-year-old coming into my office asking me where my report is? I've been doing this for 30 years, but I think once you develop that culture, it goes back to culture. Once you develop that culture, it builds upon itself. So no one can be slow if they wanted to be.
Back to culture. Another question.
Well, first, Thomas, I wanted to point out that the person who asked this question the last time is both a banker and a lawyer. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. I kind of wanted to touch a little bit on Dorothy's comments earlier, and your comment about maybe you need to get burned when the question about whether or not us as a bank and a regulated and insured industry is competing with these non-banks. And my example is PayPal. In 2 cases, I've had people talk about that they were using it with eBay. Easy way to pay. I use it. It's wonderful. But if you get into any dispute with them, the first question PayPal asks is, give us your internet address and your password. And as a banker, that just screams at us that we would never dare turn over that. But they were non-budging on that. In order to resolve the issue, that's what they wanted. And so I think that's a good example of a non-regulated industry and what you fall into when we're used to regulations and protection and all. They're not bound by those. So if that's just my comments, if y'all have anything to follow with that.
I think you're right. I think the non-banked world is looser. It's kind of like the Wild West, So I think you're right, and I would speculate that probably we will get burnt, by doing business with them. It's very possible. So, but yeah, I think you're right on.
Last question.
We hire only at the training level, so we only hire millennials. And I'm curious, you all bring a lot of energy, a lot of technology, a lot of positives to the group. The negatives are maybe a little bit of a sense of entitlement. What happens 25 years from now when the whole company is millennials? How's that culture going to look? Somebody has to be the grown-up in the room. And how do you guys see that evolving? Just kind of curious.
Well, I would hope over the 25 years we grow up a little bit, but the same thing could be said for your generation, wouldn't you agree? Over time you build experience and you grow up, and yes, the environment is going to change and the workplace is going to change, but if you're not planning for the future of your workplace, is your workplace going to have a future?
I agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead. You're fine.
I agree with that. At one time, my CEO, there's a really funny picture that he has of himself back in the late 60s. He's got long hair and scruffy mustache and all this stuff, and now he's bald and trimmed and all that stuff. So at one point in time, he was a free love hippie. So I think people do grow up. And I think probably the same thing will happen to us as happened to you all. So.
Great answer.
All I would add to that is, we millennials, it's not a one-size-fits-all term. So we were discussing that earlier. It's a lot about the values you grew up with and the stories of your parents. And so, not every millennial is immature. And so we have that going for us. But then I think that the bigger question is, the next generation coming up behind us, who's even been more accustomed to the digital space and, you know, the cell phone glued to their hand. So I think that's going to add a whole nother layer to the culture, and I think that's looking forward to that. That is the next big question. So.
Yep, great answers. And I'll just end by saying that I think kind of getting back to really leveraging those core values, right? And so there's so much that we can leverage with this really great career generation in that they have so many strengths. So how do we channel that in the right way to really take us into the future? So again, and there's our selfie. So love that. It's out on Twitter. We sent it out earlier. And one more round of applause for this wonderful and talented 21st century banker panel.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Great job.
Thank you.